Hi everyone, my name is Mel and welcome to the first episode of What's Brewing. What's Brewing is a series we aim to bring to you which makes sense of what's happening out there because hey, it is a crazy time, right? I'm helped from behind the scenes by my brother-in-law Sandeep who's behind the camera. What's Brewing also because cha is my favorite drink and I want to know what's your favorite as well. So I aim to talk to a series of guests who will share with me their expertise, guests from primarily the Sikh community. But you know what? If you're not from the Sikh community, it's okay. Stay on, stay tuned because there's enough in it for every single one of you. It's a pretty broad topic we're going to talk about, and we're going to start off today by talking about COVID-19. So stay tuned and hope you enjoy this series. Hi everyone, welcome to the first episode of What's Brewing. We have with us today Simranjit Singh, my good friend. Simran is no stranger to the Sikh community. He has been involved in several projects in the community. Most recently, he was one of the people behind the documentary for the Pai Maharaj Singh documentary. He also volunteers with the Central Sikh Gurdwara Board on the board and is someone who's a professional in the biomedical space in Singapore, having worked there for almost 15 years now. So Simran, welcome to the first episode of What's Brewing.
No, thank you, Mel. So it's a pleasure to be here as well.
It's customary, so before we go into the serious topics, I'm going to ask you, what's your favorite brew? I know you're a cha connoisseur like me, so where's your favorite cha in Singapore?
Where's my favorite cha in Singapore? Silara Gurdwara.
Okay, I can't disagree with that. I think it's one of the best chas I've ever had as well. So let's jump into this. You are the CEO of Guardant Health, which is a biomedical firm for Asia, Middle East, and Africa. And it's a very stressful time to be in the biomedical space, but it also gives you a very rare opportunity of having a ringside view to what's happening. And it's crazy right now, this whole pandemic that's happening around us. And it's probably the most, the biggest thing that's facing the generation living at the moment. So how do you feel about this? And what have you been learning on your own? What are some of the takeaways for you as a biomedical professional from this whole episode?
Yes. No, I think you characterized it perfectly. I think this is probably one of the greatest maladies that we have seen facing the human population and mankind. It is devastating, to say the least. 1.6 million people affected, over almost 100,000 people dead. This is something that I think the world was not prepared for. It's a pandemic that we had early signs that was brewing, that it could occur, but I think we never really anticipated it to be this scale. It is, in my mind, something like a perfect storm. You have a virus that impacts and affects the lungs. It is one that spreads viciously and aggressively. It is one that works and infects in patients that are asymptomatic, so it's very difficult to detect. And it is one that also the current treatments and facilities and infrastructure were not ready to be able to contain and control. So, it is something that I would say will have long-lasting effects for sure. For us in the healthcare industry, you rightly said we face it much closer than others, and the reason for that is because we personally in Guardant Health, we deal with a vulnerable group, the cancer patients, and many of them are advanced cancer patients that no matter what, whether there's a virus or no virus, will need to seek treatment immediately, and so their access and their ability to now get treatment and be able to see their doctors on a regular basis has been impeded. And so on our side, we feel really aggrieved because we can't help as much as we would like to for these patients. And many of them are now trying to find ways to be able to still deal with the situation and be able to overcome the circumstances. However, we also see that resources in many of the countries are vastly different, and how they've been attributed towards fighting the crisis has also been very much different. Some have done it with a little bit more vigor and being more aggressive, efficient, and expeditious. Others have taken a little bit more time to activate their resources. all in all, we do see that countries that were expeditious and aggressive and efficient have been able to get ahead of the disease. That being said, it is relentless. There are multiple waves that come in over and over again, and it's one that will really test the resolute of the healthcare system. And so I think from our perspective, we feel that there are vulnerable groups per se that will need to be looked after in the case of Guardant Health cancer patients, and we are doing a lot more in that space, and happy to share more of those as we go along this chat.
Yeah, I was going to ask you actually, is there anything that you're doing in your own work that's helping in the fight against COVID-19 or perhaps life after it? So you shared about cancer patients, maybe perhaps elaborate a bit about that for our viewers back home.
Sure, happy to do so. So, many of the cancer patients, when they are on treatment, are already immunosuppressed, right? They are either on chemotherapy or they are immuno-oncology drugs. And so, as their immune system is being sort of suppressed by the drugs that they are taking or the treatments that they are taking, they become very susceptible towards infections and specifically COVID-19. So one way that we are looking at how can we mitigate that need for their exposure to the healthcare systems, right? Many of them, specifically advanced cancer patients, will need to go in for specific biopsies or tissue biopsies to be able to understand what is the mutations that are driving their cancer, and then be able to find appropriate treatments to treat that. However, resources are so overburdened in the healthcare system, they can't schedule tissue biopsies. They can't schedule their tests to be done in the path labs within the hospital. So what we have done, and at least from a Guardant perspective, is we are a liquid biopsy company, so we deal with a simple blood draw. We have looked at mobile phlebotomy services so that the patients don't even need to go into the hospital. Can we do a blood draw at their home or a mobile clinic, and hence reduce the exposure in the hospital to any possible infection or cross infections? The other part of it is we've been able to keep our labs going, specifically in Redwood City, as well as now as we're building up our lab in Japan, going 24/7, so that we are able to then still provide the service that is required for quick decisions for their cancer treatment. So the reports are being generated within a turnaround of 7 days. It goes to the physician. They are now working with physicians on a telecommute basis, and they have their Zoom calls or WebEx or whatever that medium is, and be able to share their reports to the patient and start treatment based on those results. So in a way, what we have been able to do is to enable the treatment regimes to continue, but not allow the patient to get or minimize the exposure of the patient towards infection or cross infections in the hospitals.
Well, that's really useful work, and I'm proud to see that one of us is helping out in this regard. So Simran, one of the things that has worked well for Singapore during COVID-19 and has set it apart from other countries is its capacity to fight the pandemic itself. And this ranges from testing kits and masks at the precautionary stage to respirators, ventilators, and hospital beds at the treatment stage. Now, you have been deeply involved in the biomedical scene in Singapore. You were for 6 years the chairman of Bio Singapore, which is a non-profit organization for the industry. And you are also currently on the Ministry of Health's National Healthcare Innovation Center Oversight Committee, which helps to decide the funding and investment that goes into innovation of healthcare in Singapore. So how important has it been that Singapore's investment in healthcare over the last few years in bearing fruit right now in our fight against COVID-19?
Yep. No, very much so. I think Singapore had great foresight in terms of biomedical research and biomedical advancement. I think this started all the way in the 2000s, where we started building up capacity and infrastructure such as Biopolis. And then that spread even further, each 5-year plan, culminating to the latest one, which was done in 2015, and will end this year in 2020, where almost $19 billion was sort of set aside for healthcare innovation and healthcare advancements. And I think what Singapore has done progressively is to look at areas where there is tremendous amount of capabilities and aptitude and the ability to amass resources. And so one area where we've seen already and really impactful in the COVID crisis was diagnostics, right? Singapore started looking at diagnostics post the 2004 SARS epidemic that sort of gripped Singapore, and there was a lot of focus in terms of developing diagnostics and to be able to do rapid tests and to be able to look at different diseases. And one of the key areas of focus was infectious diseases. I mean, we have been a hotbed for infectious diseases like dengue and chikungunya and many others.
Right.
And so it was one that naturally the resources were amassed to be able to look into creating these kind of rapid tests to be able to diagnose very quickly. And so when this pandemic hit, we were one of the first few that were able to put out kits to be able to detect COVID-19 or the SARS CoV virus. And so we were the capabilities to be able to then replicate that and put it to industry was also one that was really fast and efficient. So there's a diagnostics hub that is within A-Star that has multiple companies that are spin-offs from A-Star developing different diagnostic kits. And they were able to get access to the technology from A-Star researchers and be able to commercialize and be able to create these kits much more expeditiously and then be able to send them out into the global supply chain. And so now you see kits from Singapore in many different markets and many different countries where they are now being used to be able to detect COVID-19. So I think in diagnostics, we did a really good job. The other part of it with regards to ventilators and medical technology as a whole, that's also an area where Singapore developed very deep capabilities in engineering. And this was something that was already there before. And we cross-trained a lot of the engineers to become biomedical engineers. And so with that capabilities, now a lot of the many of the systems globally are produced and manufactured in Singapore. And so that also helps us in terms of access. And the third one, I think, is more in terms of the foresight that was done by the Ministry of Health as well as many other agencies to stockpile. And I think we were able to stockpile a lot of the masks and a lot of the PPE equipment that would be very necessary in any outbreak or any epidemic. Obviously, we probably didn't anticipate the scale of this epidemic or this pandemic, and I don't think any country per se was able to do that as well. And so there's also a need for us to be judicious, right? Because you don't have an endless stockpile. And so the measures that have been taken have been very progressive, right? We started off with measures of trying to be able to curtail visitors and travel so that we are not bringing in the infection. We then started looking at social distancing, and now we have progressed into, yes, we need protective barriers because there's community transmission and you need to start wearing masks. So I think we have also been able to stretch that stockpile quite efficiently.
So yeah, that's great. I mean, it was really nice to see that Singapore was exporting a lot of this stuff overseas as well and helping other countries in their own fight. So healthcare has been one of the greatest increases in government expenditure over the last few years as far as the budget goes. Do you think we expect to see such increases continue given that we are advancing more and more towards an aging society, and also because there's a school of thought that pandemics will even be more increasing as we go forward with climate change and stuff like that? Do you think healthcare investments are going to increase more?
Yes, I definitely think so. I think looking at not only with regards to pandemics, I think with regards to pandemics, my view on that, just to look at some correlations, right? We had the tsunamis that hit us in 2004 and 2011. Altogether, there were close to about 250,000 people who were killed in that disaster. And once those disasters hit, it created a realization globally that there was a need for some sort of early warning systems that need to be put in place, right? So now you have vast tsunami warning systems that are across multiple countries, and you are able to detect them much in advance and be able to prepare that there's a disaster coming and you need to be able to evacuate, or you need to be able to build up barriers. I think the same needs to now be looked at in pandemics and outbreaks. We have the tools now. 20 years ago, we didn't have AI established as it is right now. We are able to now detect and be able to quickly detect that these specific outbreaks can actually become more widespread because they are virulent, because they're spreading so quickly, and that spread is not based on symptoms. It is asymptomatic. It will become exponential very quickly, and you need to be able to be aggressive in your measures that you take. And I think those early warning systems is where the investments will go to. I think more healthcare systems, and Singapore included, will invest into creation of these kind of early warning systems, this kind of country, regional, global systems that will require coordination, but will also require initiatives and, more importantly, political will and political power that is given to them, that they can take actions independently when such a pandemic occurs. And I think that's where probably we'll see Singapore take the leadership.
Yeah, agreed. I think one of the shocking things to have emerged from this whole pandemic is that there's a real lack of international coordination and international political leadership in this. Certainly in many countries we see the political will is missing. So we're quite fortunate that in Singapore, the government has come down strong in addressing this. I know lastly, and before you go, this is going to be a very tough question and it's very difficult to exact this, but in your informed observation, how do you think COVID-19 will pan out from here? Are we likely to see more of a spike in Singapore? And if so, where could this come from? What could this be caused by? Or do you think we will flatten this curve that we're seeing currently and have another flat curve as we have done in the last few months? And perhaps maybe for good once and for all, maybe this circuit breaker may help with that. I mean, experts say that it might take 10 to 12 days for us to see results of this circuit breaker. And what do you think is a reasonable timeline before we can say that the world is truly has truly overcome COVID-19?
That's a very tough question, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a crystal ball to be able to share that, and more importantly, there's very little reference points you can take.
Exactly.
Right? Because this is unprecedented. We have never seen something like this before. But one thing that I do think is that this is relentless. The waves will continue, and so it's not going to be a V shape. It's not going to be something that we recover very quickly on, and will take some time. I think the measures that we have put in with regards to social distancing and this circuit breaker that we have put in will help. Will help to sort of flatten the curve and maybe control it somewhat. Where are the waves of infection going to come from? I think we've already seen a lot of it in the foreign worker dormitories that because of the close proximity that they are in, will need to be actioned upon, and I think that's something that the government is already doing very proactively. The other part that I think would then need to be looked at as another lever, and I look at other countries that have already done this, right? You see, if you look at South Korea and if you look at Taiwan, what is the other lever that they had pulled? The lever was on being able to test rapidly,
right,
to be able to test mass in mass. The reason is because they are asymptomatic transmitters and super spreaders. And so how do you detect that? There's no way to detect it unless you have a system of being able to do mass testing.
So Simran, I also read that the issue with mass testing is that the kind of testing kits we have right now are not equipped to do that. So essentially what we need is like what you get with pregnancy test kits, essentially test and true. Is that true that that's currently lacking?
So that was true probably a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
So if you look at in the last week or so, a Singaporean company, BioLeadix, was able to already get a CE mark on a test kit that was 10 minutes. And so you're already getting the capabilities now that are coming to fast turnarounds. Obviously, they are still lab-based or they are still specific system-based. But they are portable systems, but they still have to be system driven rather than a pregnancy kit where you can just swap and do it yourself, right? But still, I think the ability to do it fast and rapid is one that helps in order to do mass testing. And you're seeing that already. That was already being done and executed in drive-through testing in South Korea, in kits that were sent, that swab kits that were sent out in Taiwan, because they have a national healthcare system, national health insurance system. They were able to then look at whoever has already been tested and who needs to be retested. And so they were sending out the kits to people to get tested, or they were sending out reminders for them to go to a primary healthcare clinic to get tested. So I think that's another lever that we'll need to think about after this, right? If social distancing and the circuit breaker, I think, will have an impact, but if it doesn't flatten the curve further, or we have another wave of infection, then the next lever would need to be mass testing, and that would be one way to be able to then try and be a little bit more aggressive long-term wise, because you are then able to detect where are these clusters which were undetected previously. You asked me about how long will it take and what are the solutions. I think the most impactful way to win this fight would be looking at treatments and vaccines. On the treatment front, I think there are large-scale studies that are being done specifically in the UK, where there are multiple arms of different drugs that are being used to look at many different antiviral drugs, or also hydroxychloroquine that was mentioned. And all of them are in different arms of those trials. I think they're close to about 2,000 people already recruited, or 1,000 plus people that are already recruited in that trial. So that you haven't seen before. There's never been a trial that has recruited so fast in a week. And so I think that will help, because once we have treatments, then at least the recovery process becomes shorter, right? And then you get people that are recovered and out in the open and are not going to be dangerous to spread further infection. The vaccines per se will probably take a little bit longer, right? Typically vaccines take about 12 months to 18 months to be fully developed and be mass produced. So I would think even if you shorten that timeline, it will still take a year before we finally see an effective vaccine that is on the market and available globally. So I would think that would be where the fight will be truly won. The treatments will help to be able to at least have armament to fight this COVID-19. I think the disease will still linger until the vaccine comes online.
Right. So, yeah, I think that's a reasonable timeline. I think that's something that a lot of the other experts have echoed as well. Thank you, Simran, for sharing your thoughts with us and for shedding light on a lot of issues which, frankly, are question mark in many of our minds. It is a trying time and definitely a complicated and confusing time. As you have said, it is unprecedented. There aren't many reference points. So we will come back to you again in time to come, hopefully down the road when things are a bit more positive, to share more of what you have learned from this whole pandemic. Thanks so much and enjoy your cup of cha.
All right, thank you. Stay safe, stay home.